JT Realmuto, 333 since June 1st. He leads the National League in batting average since June 1st.
Yeah.
How about that? And you see Bryce Harper. Now, Bryce Harper did not have a good game yesterday. He didn't really have a great weekend. He obviously hits the home run against Stroman on Saturday, but I think directionally speaking, you feel really good about where Bryce Harper is and where he's going to be over the last couple months, which is different. I mean, I know that you were confident, even when he was at his low point. You're like, I think it's coming. You were right. Kudos to you, but you still need to see it. You still need to see him go off and say, like, okay, there it is. So you have Realmuto playing like the JT Realmuto of old. Fantastic defensive play yesterday, too, at the plate. That's about as good as it gets. You have Schwarber in the middle of this MVP-like season. You have Harper firing the way that he is now. Does that make you say, hey, we don't need to be as desperate or as aggressive even at the deadline because we are starting to get more from these guys offensively? Or do you think it makes them say, you know what? We have the starting staff. Bryce looks like Bryce. Schwarber is out of his mind. JT's making that last real push. We got to go do this. Like, we got to be a little bit more aggressive now than we would have otherwise been, because I think we might be a little bit better now than we were a month ago.
Yeah, I think it's closer to that, but I don't think it's like when I say the Phillies are all in, I think that they're all in because they believe that most of what they have here can win a championship. But I don't think what I mean by all in that, we have 6 top 100 prospects. We're going to trade 4 of them here to try and make this team a World Series contender. Like, they may trade 1 or 2 at most. And I think that's what so I think it's going to be that kind of threading the needle down the middle type of deal where they're going to be aggressive, but not over aggressive. And they're not going to just sit on their hands either. I think they're going to make a move or 2 moves that matter. But it's not going to be some grand overhaul that I think a lot of people are hoping for. I think you're going to, let's just say that I'm just going to throw 2 names out, Bob. Just these are the 2 names. Let's just say they come away from the deadline adding Luis Robert and Johan Duran. Is that enough? I think it could be.
Do you think Robert used in I don't want to say a pure platoon, but like a 70-30 type of split, or do they say, here it is, dude?
I think I think if they were to trade for Robert, I think at first you're the guy. Just go out there. But they have the alternative of, hey, maybe we end up doing, you know what I'm saying? Because you don't know with him. I mean, he's an injury issue, right? He's always hurt. He's hurt again. He got hit by a 101-mile-per-hour fastball on the forearm. X-rays were negative, so it looks like he's okay, but he missed a game yesterday because of it. So the guy's constantly injured. Not had a great year and a half, although since June 10th he's been pretty solid. But you're running a risk. That's a little bit of a risk, but it's worthy in my mind. It's a worthy risk, right? It's a risk that if it pans out, it could be really, really good for this team. So
how far would you be willing to go to bring in that particular player?
I don't think you need to go far. Because of his contract situation, I don't think you need to go far. Right. He's got team options for the next 2 years that are $20 million a year. There's no way anyone's picking that up unless he gets traded somewhere and goes off, right? So it's basically a rental. So I don't think that the White Sox are going to get much of anything for him. In all honesty, I really don't. I think you could get him for, a couple of lower tier prospect type players at this point.
There is a report that I saw last night, right around 9 o'clock, from a writer, Spanish-speaking baseball reporter, Francis Romero.
Yeah.
And he reported, and he's got 27,000 followers on
He's good.
This is like a real guy. Trade talks between the Yankees and Diamondbacks over Suarez stalled after Arizona asked for an MLB player, an upper-level prospect, AA to AAA, and at least one lower-level prospect per industry sources. Yankees still holding tight to top farm talent. Okay. I guess the most obvious and pressing question off of that is that a price that if you were the Phillies, you'd be willing to meet? And in my pipe dream, you want an MLB player, and we got a little bit of a roster jam up here. Could I interest you in a 280 to 285 hitting third baseman who's worked really hard to improve defensively, who's under team control for one more year, and you're the Arizona Diamondbacks and you don't totally want to punt, and your ownership is like, I don't want to do a rebuild and I kind of want to try to win. Maybe not this year, but next year. Could I interest you in that third baseman?
So I'll play your game with you here for a second, but then I'm going to say something different. So the game that I'll play with you is, yeah, sure, I'm in. I'm in with that. If that's what you're doing, if you're going Bohm and Abel for Suarez, I mean, I'd like to re-sign Suarez for a couple years if I could. I think it's a lot to give up for a rental. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I could see that. But here's the thing I'm going to say, just from my experience and being around this stuff for a long, long time. When the Diamondbacks are asking for a rental player, it's still early, right? In a lot of ways. Like the change in the ask doesn't happen until a couple, 2 to 3 days before the deadline comes in any sport, really. And so, you're probably going to see the Diamondbacks pull back on that ask maybe as soon as today. Maybe they wait till tomorrow, but whatever. They're going to do it here in the next few days. You always ask for more. The Yankees were desperate because their situation was bad. And I honestly think that the Yankees made the right move because we saw this weekend, holy hell, how bad their defense is. So adding Ryan McMahon, who is not as good a hitter, obviously, as Gino Suarez, like that's, but he's going to make a huge difference in that infield defensively. And you saw it in the 2 games against the Phillies. He was really good defensively. So I think that the Yankees pivoted because they had to. Somebody's going to give the Diamondbacks something good for Eugenio Suarez. I just don't think it's going to be that much to get him.
If you're the Phillies, and he's the one that everybody wants to talk about because of the home run totals, because of the obvious need that the Phillies have in terms of the right-handed power. I guess what I keep coming back to is I have these visions of October where you have Harper, you have Schwarber, and you have teams that are just not going to let those 2 guys beat them. And if you have a player that has that potency in the mix, doesn't that cure the issue? If you asked me a week ago, would they do this? I'd say no shot. I don't even know why we're talking about this. Now I feel like it's a possibility. I still don't think it's going to happen.
Well, so let me throw something at you, Bob. So over the weekend, I put a poll out on Twitter where I asked people, would you trade Mick Abel for Eugenio Suarez? Straight up. Knowing that he's a 34-year-old free agent, may not re-sign here. And then you got to consider the fit, right? Like, where do you move guys? How does it work out? It's probably Kyle Schwarber to left field. All right. So to make Suarez your DH is probably what the solution is. If you do that, right? That's probably the most likely scenario. So I asked, and I was honestly surprised because I thought everybody would be so enamored with the notion of adding a 36 home run bat to the middle of your lineup. I was surprised that it was as close as it was, and it was 56-44 was the vote. Yes, 56-44 in favor, but 44% said no, and I get it because I sit there and say to myself, this is a bad defensive team, and we're about to make it worse with this trade. And I still think, yes, you need that bat, but you can't be a terrible defensive team in the playoffs.
No, you can't. And I mean, look, my retort to that would be like, well, they were terrible in 2022 and they came within 2 games of the World Series. That all being said, there were a couple different instances in that postseason that they could have been sunk by their defense and they were able to overcome it. And I also can't point to one postseason run and say that makes it okay. Much like I was perplexed when the owner talked about how you can't just go in at the deadline because Ruben Amaro did it 15 years ago and then they blew for a decade. Like, that to me that made no sense. I could not believe those words came out of his mouth. Okay, fine. My last point on this would be, if not the Phillies, then probably some other team, possibly a National League team. And look, I'm not saying that this guy is Babe Ruth and that if you trade for him, oh my God, he's going to put you over the top and you automatically go to the World Series. But how much of it do you have to massage? 2 different parts. One, if you don't get them, someone else might, and that might push them above you or past you in terms of your roster construction. And then the second part of it is, and I thought that maybe the Phillies were a victim of this a little bit a year ago. I know the Phillies love their clubhouse and they rely on one another and it's a tight-knit group and all that happy horse shit. How much of it plays in when the deadline comes and goes and you don't go make that big move and you say, like, we're right there. You know, we've been knocking on the door at this thing for the last few years. We have a good group. We think we can win the World Series. How much of it, like from a psychological standpoint, when your ownership group, when your front office goes in and makes the splash move, how much does that invigorate you as a clubhouse and say, like, all right, now let's go get this thing? And if they don't go out and do something big or consequential, you know, is there a little bit of a letdown where you go, all right, like, I mean, we got enough here to like compete, but and you're like left kind of underwhelmed. I mean, do you think that's real, or is that just like a totally made up narrative talking point that I like?
No, it could be real, but here's what I'll say to temper it. Let's see who gets moved at the deadline, right? And when you sit back and the dust settles and you get to look at it, you know, from a totality of the league, and you could sit there and go, okay, who could they really have gotten that they didn't get that somebody else got? That you go, oh, that should have been the move that they made. Right. And so, like, ultimately, that's what it'll come down to. If there are players like that, and you go, why couldn't you give up what the Mets gave up for this guy or what the Cubs gave up for this guy? Then you can have that argument and say, yeah, maybe that impacts. Maybe they look at it and go, well, this sucks. But then if you look at it, it's either super overpays for players or big names that just don't move, and everybody's just kind of adding along the margins. Well, then you sit there and go, well, they did the best that they could with what was out there, right? I mean, so I think that's the thing. And even in that moment, I think then you look back at last winter and say, that's where they screwed this up, right? If you don't get the players that you want to get or the types of bats or pitchers or whatever that you need here by Thursday, it's not necessarily going to be that they did it wrong this week, but rather that they did it wrong in November, December, January.